Alright, everyone, that is it. We should be live. 4-game slate today. Feels like old times. Feels good. 4 games on the weekends is nice. This probably the last time with some series ending, so hopefully enjoy our last weekend of decent fantasy basketball for a while. Not that there aren't edges, and not that fantasy basketball isn't pretty amazing, even when you have fewer, less sexy games to look at. But tomorrow, I imagine, the last day of 4 games that we're going to get in quite some time. What is today's Snapple fact? What a great question. I enjoy a good Snapple fact. I'm a big factoid guy. Like to get myself back up on Jeopardy once the guy playing now is done. So I'm not messing with that dude. That dude is bringing some smoke. Let's get into this. Waiting for links and things that I might retweet them. Let's see, things to talk about while we're going live. I got an interesting comment earlier that I want to expound upon a little bit, and again, being gentle here, and this was a private message, so I won't name this person, so I'm not trying to embarrass anyone, I guess is my point. But someone said to me, everyone seems to be on Jimmy Butler today, and I'm not playing him because the Nets are number 1 against shooting guards. And this is presented to you as a fact if you log into, say, FanDuel, where Jimmy Butler is one of the best plays on the slate today, assuming Joel Embiid does not play, with his price having reduced and being point per dollar priced even better than DraftKings, where he's well too cheap for the ceiling he has without Embiid against the Nets. They put me under NHL again. They love to put me under NHL. Somebody retweet the link for me. Oh my god. Yeah, someone throw the thing in Snapchat and I'll resend it out. Apparently we're doing hockey again. If you limit using it to only center, using your DVA, DRK, all the various defensive per position ranks you get, at center might be only worthless. Worthless would be, I think, your best possible outcome there. And you might think, what's worse than worthless? If you use frequently, for example, in the Jimmy Butler case, if you look at shooting guard, the wings are especially bad. It's worse than worthless. It is openly misrepresentative. Setting aside the inherent flaws in such a system when you have guys like Joel Embiid out, or when you're looking by team, you have different players playing different positions. It's grossly inaccurate in so many ways. I don't even know where to start. Why are they best against shooting guards? Is it because that exceptional Joe Harris defense? Does that make sense to you? Is Jimmy Butler a shooting guard? I would submit to you, and again, this will change whether or not you have the presence or absence of Mike Scott, whether or not Embiid is in there, something. But Butler spends a fair amount of time and the 1 and the 2 and the 3 really in this offense. I could spend a half hour on it. I was just looking for something to talk about as we were getting loaded, but yes, that's an incredibly bad way to play, and you will never, ever, ever do you any good, and you should just completely ignore those things. If you have any other data, I honestly don't know if literally you did not watch a show, read an article, know anything about basketball, if looking at those things would net out as positive. It's very close, but it's incredibly misrepresentative, and I incredibly implore upon you to not be like, oh, this guy's got, literally, if you knew nothing, you'd look at that today and be like, oh, wow, number 1 rank in the NBA against shooting guards. Better not play me shooting guard Jimmy Butler, and that's just, that's bad. Don't do that. Happy 420, everyone. Something good about this state. It's not coming to me right now, but I'll think about it. It'll come up to me for a second. Another quick thing while we're getting loaded. I'll take 2 minutes on this one. I saw someone on Twitter. There are many people on Twitter who want to make money doing everything, obviously, from being a cam model to what have you. And that obviously includes the DFS space where there's everyone trying to build a team, sell their projections, put out lineups and get tips back, all sorts of that. And I generally don't have an issue with that, provided it's done honestly. But one of the conversations I got embroiled in recently included a player making the statement that his world's best player projections were the key to winning, and he was talking about saying, how many fantasy points a guy was going to score today, etc. That's impossible. It's literally impossible by any understanding of probability, statistics, mathematics, or what have you. Knowing how much player is going to score is really important. There is just not enough room there versus the zeitgeist, versus the public perception. There is not enough advantage to be taken there to be gained. A good way, and I'll give you the very brief version of this half-hour talk, to look at DFS is, okay, I'm playing against this guy, I'm playing against these other guys. It's like poker, but the house is grabbing 15% off the top, so I need to be better than him, and I need to be better by, depending on the rake, 15% to break even, and better than that to pull down some money, which is why it's really hard. Again, when I used to play most of the time, it wasn't 15%, it was 5% or 0% counting incentives, overlay, etc. And there's just not that much room in having better player projections. It's much less valuable than knowing what's going on. That person could make that claim. I don't know specifically if they're referring to like knowing how many minutes people are going to play, but keeping track of the news, knowing how many minutes someone is going to play, knowing changes in the systems, coaches' tendencies, things like that, at any point in the year are vastly more valuable, assuming you have any knowledge of player projections. So take the 5 best fantasy basketball minds you can think of in the world, okay? Ask them how many points James Harden is going to get today. Being as loose as possible, I imagine you would get answers between 54 and 62 as the absolute outsides. And there is, with many things, a certain uncertainty principle in that you can only be so accurate in this differentiation. Nobody, everybody in Vegas, every supercomputer in the world, is not going to be able to make, because of all the variance and all the things that change and blowouts and substitutions and 36 versus 38 minutes, whatever you, be able to be specifically accurate and with any degree of credibility say he's going to score 58.61 fantasy points on average. That's not really possible. So, again, there are many, many, many publicly available projection systems and common sense. It's not worth 15% if somehow you are more accurate than the 5 people we just named, or looking at public projections which are out there, even if those aren't great. Let's assume that everyone else says 55 and you have better projections and you know that it's closer to 57. What do you really think that's worth, setting aside the fact that no matter how good you are, you'll be wrong nearly as often as you're right? So just another thing I wanted to bring up. People build their own models. That's great. Build your own models. It's great practice, if nothing else. You may be the best in the world at it. You may have better insight than myself or Josh or Adam or any number of people who put out projections and be able to be more accurate. And there's no reason not to do that. I'm not saying accurate player projections aren't wonderful. They're tremendous. I hope you all have them and get them. But they're not worth, being like, you can just use my player projections and win. No, you can't. That's just a complete and total falsehood. That's like, buy this bar of soap and there might be a gold coin in it. It's just not something that will occur. So, we apparently are good to go. People have filed in. Let us go then, you and I, where the evening is spread out across the sky. Gentleman's handshake for the first person who can come up with that quote. The Philadelphia 76ers visiting the Brooklyn Nets. The presence or absence of now game time decision Joel Embiid is beyond massive. It is easily this year on this slate, with everything else that's going on and the value that becomes dependent on it and the relative value of the other guys on his team and the opposing team due to his defensive presence as opposed to, say, Greg Monroe's defensive presence, The biggest piece of news as far as how it affects the slate of the year for me, pretty significantly. This slate with Joel Embiid in is incredibly different from this slate with Joel Embiid out. Joel Embiid being not in the 10 most important pieces that it affects. I have published my ranks for today. They are with Joel Embiid out. I have absolutely no confidence that will be the case. I don't think anybody knows, as has been reported in our premium Slack chat. He is warming up without a brace, without a compression sleeve, without anything on his leg. The combination of that, plus the fact that he was upgraded in the midst of the day, makes me think that there is a very real chance that he gets out there and plays. Right now, I would have trouble calling it on either side of 50-50. The reason he would not play, given all that positive evidence, is the fact that he just shouldn't play. Why risk an injury? Why risk aggravation? Why risk swelling tomorrow? You should be able to get this series anyway. I don't think you want him to play these 4 games under almost any circumstances. So give yourself, the rest of the team who just won without him on the road, the chance to put yourself up 3-1 and give the guy 8-10 days off. Now, I'm not there. I'm not in the locker room. I'm not with the training staff. I don't know if he walked in and said, feel great today. I'm going to go warm up and see how I feel. And the fact that he's been warming up for some time means hopefully this news comes early. But, again, I cannot overstate how much it changes things because of the presence or absence of Greg Monroe, the extra value of Boban Marjanovic, the extra value given to his teammates in what is one of the best, by far the best fantasy game of the day. You look at a guy like Tobias Harris. Tobias Harris with Embiid out on DraftKings on a scale of 1 to 10 is like an 8 play for me. He's not a 10. Greg Monroe at $3,100 starting against Brooklyn was a 10. It's very, very good play. With Embiid in, he's a 5. Still fine. You know what I'm saying? So this radically changes it, and we're going to have to really think on our feet because whether he's in or out and whether or not that news comes at 2:20 or 2:45 is going to change everything. So we'll do my very able best to correctly interpret that whenever the hell it comes down. But it is simply a ridiculous piece of news. For the 76ers, if Embiid plays, I am not terribly interested. And by that I mean I would want something like 20% if I was MMEing on both sites. He is about similarly priced on both sites. He clearly has a massive upside. Game 1 gave you the 2.5 fantasy points a minute you need to pay off his salary. And I repeat, you need stupid production, assuming he plays 21 to 24 minutes. And I do think that is a safe assumption. Could it go sideways? Could he go out there and play 30 minutes because he feels so great? Obviously, that's possible. But it would be very strange for him to sit out a game, be doubtful, get upgraded to game time decision a couple hours, go out and warm up, and somehow play 30 minutes. So I think it's safe to assume 24 minutes is about all you get. And like the ceiling is sort of off. When you spend 10-9 on FanDuel or 9-7 on DraftKings for Joel Embiid, you want a shot at 75. 3+ fantasy points a minute over 24+ minutes is pretty goddamn unlikely. It literally happens about annually. So you're looking at floor of what you saw last game he played, where he gets 38-40. And that's not the floor, by the way. He can play 20 minutes, only score 1.5 fantasy points a minute, and put up 30. That's a more accurate description of the floor. But you're looking at, a likely outcome of him putting up 2 points a minute in a brilliant matchup and giving you 40, 45. That's not good enough. You need him to really crush faces for 2.5 minutes. Now, there is a lot of other good value, though much of it disappears when Joel Embiid plays. And so you can certainly make an argument that, you want him for his raw points, but you still have Giannis and Harden, who are not that much more. They are $600-800 more on FanDuel and, about the same on DraftKings. It does not make sense to me to have a massive amount of Joel Embiid. This will change if it comes out that he's starting at 257, because I'm going to like Joel Embiid at 3.5% owned. But at 15 or 20, I certainly wouldn't need any more than that. If he does not play, and I'm annoyed that he came out as a game time decision, because it ruins what would have been, in my opinion, the best play of the day, which would have been playing Boban Marjanovic over Greg Monroe. So I hope he doesn't play, and I hope he doesn't play early, as in we find out that news in 15 minutes. Because I just like Boban more than Greg Monroe, and he was going to be 1/5 owned. Our last ownership projections had Greg Monroe, I think, 36, and Boban at 4. Which is preposterous. But I want to get into this decision a little bit more, and I will attempt to do a 2-minute version, because obviously there's a lot of games to talk about, but I think this is kind of important. So, last game, they start Greg Monroe. Very nice. Greg Monroe plays 5 minutes, basically, gives way to Boban. Boban plays 5 minutes. No one's in foul trouble yet. Gives way to Greg Monroe. Greg Monroe plays 5 minutes, gives way to Boban. Boban plays 8 minutes. That all added up to 23, so I'm putzing some seconds there, but that's basically it. 5 for Greg, 5 for Boban, 5 for Greg, 8 minutes to close out the half for Boban. So in the first half, with all players available, Greg Monroe played 10 minutes. Boban, I'll give you the exact numbers, because I have it up in front of me. Greg Monroe played I believe 11 minutes and a second, and Boban played 17 minutes, or 16 minutes and 59 seconds. That could be off by a couple seconds, but I repeat, in the first half of that game, with everyone healthy and no foul trouble, Greg Monroe played 11 minutes, Boban played 17. Okay. Let's go to the second half. Going into the second half, Boban has, I believe, 2 fouls, and Greg Monroe doesn't have a relevant foul total his turn. So, Greg Monroe starts the second half, plays 5.5 minutes. Boban comes in, gets fouls 3, 4, and 5 in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. So Boban comes back out, Greg Monroe comes back in, plays an additional 6 minutes, and then, with a good 8.5 minutes left in the game, they put Boban back in with 8 minutes left, and in my opinion, he probably plays all 8 of those minutes, and he gets his 6th foul and fouls out in 1 minute and 31 seconds. I don't know how anyone, and please tweet me if you somehow have a different interpretation of this evidence, which apparently no one else in the world read, which is why you were going to get 40% Greg Monroe and 4% Boban, who does cost, I think, slightly more on both sites. I don't understand how you looked at this and concluded Greg Monroe was a better play. I don't know how you looked at this and concluded he was going to get as much time as Boban. And I understand people just, looked at it offhand and went, wow, Greg Monroe got 24.5 minutes. Boban got 18. Yeah, I have no reason to expect that to have been the case whatsoever. And again, first half, they were both there. They were both healthy. No one had any foul trouble. You got 11 minutes of Greg Monroe. You got 17 minutes of Boban. So, long story short, if Embiid is out, I absolutely am playing much more Boban Marjanovic than Greg Monroe. Significantly. Now, this doesn't mean fade Greg Monroe. I like them next to each other on DraftKings. I think that's just great. It's a very unique lineup. No one is going to, obviously, no one's going to play Boban the hell anyway, apparently. But I honestly think there's a chance on this slate we'd have gotten Boban at 8%, and we would have been 5 of that 8%, and Greg Monroe would have been 35%, and there was a real chance Monroe would play. Well, I think Monroe might have played 20 minutes. I think he might have played 4 or 5-minute shifts, and Boban might have played 28. And Boban is a better fantasy point per minute producer than Greg Monroe even. So, very, very aggravated to get this late into the season and see a spot where hey, everybody, I'm going to make us $250,000, and instead fucking Joel Embiid wants to be a goddamn hero. So, 221, I am praying with every second that Joel Embiid is ruled out. Greg Monroe has already been said that Gregors will be starting in the event. But, yes, big, huge, big, really, really, really pissed about that. You know what I'm saying? You work hard, you never get an edge. You find an edge, and, So yeah, there's that. Holy pot tweets. Keith Pompey of Pompey on Sixers tweets, Joel Embiid looks solid compared to Game 3's warm-ups. I would be shocked if he doesn't play. No, they didn't play side by side 1 second. God. Sorry, I'm really, really tilted. I'd be super tilted if I was you guys. But, okay. So, I guess I'm going to now totally turn the goddamn show on its head and look at the slate as if, which totally undermines hours and hours of research, and I'm going to be doing a lot of this shit off the cuff, but we're running out of time, so I guess I have to look at this. Everybody on both teams is significantly worse in this first game. That doesn't mean they're bad, but they're significantly worse. Ben Simmons at $8,500 or 10-3 was a very, very good play without Joel Embiid out there. His projection for me would have been somewhere in the range of slightly north of 50. With Joel Embiid in play, it's closer to about 42 or 43. If they were the same price, he would take Monroe more points per minute. God, there's people in chat being like, I can't wait to play Greg Monroe. By the way, who's in our premium Slack chat and not watching the show? Anyway, if you come in late, watch it at 1.5 times speed until it catches up. You can do that. But yeah, I'm super tilted about that. Okay. Tobias Harris goes from being woo to JJ Redick goes from being legitimately very good. $5,000 on DK. That last game was super sexy without Joel Embiid. I'd have him projected 31, 32 fantasy points. Small forward on FanDuel, which is balls. Huge fan. $5,000 on DK. Huge fan. Now, don't really like him much at all. Goes down to like 3.5, 4 on a scale of 1 to 10. Rondé Hollis Jefferson goes from, not at the level I was with Boban, but one of the plays I liked absolutely the most on the day. If Embiid plays, you still project him for mid-40s. I think that's about the right thing. I did not do any preparation with Embiid playing because I presumed he would not. He was doubtful. And in general, 96% of the time, if someone is doubtful, you just presume they are out and go from that. Anyway. But yeah, that's about where that number is going to be. I give him a superhuman, like 1.8 fantasy points per minute. If he plays, 24 minutes, that brings you in a little under 40, actually. Someone type in the premium Slack chat that I want people to watch it from the beginning. So, 40% of Simmons and Embiid on ? Why so much? I don't understand your question, Snapplefax. You're going to have to rephrase that for me in a format I understand. But again, everyone from this game gets worse. The 76ers, obviously, Joel Embiid and his 30-35% usage show up. That makes everybody worse. It slows down the game a little bit, depending on... actually keeps the pace about the same. For the Nets, you go from having Greg Monroe, who is apocryphally terrible at defense at center, and Boban, who is, depending on who you are, bad to great at center, to having one of the best defensive centers in the league in there for 24 minutes. So yeah, it's all kinds of worse for people in this game. At the start of the day, assuming Embiid was out, of my top, we'll say 15 plays on the slate, 9 of them came from this game. Now it would be 4 or 5, and you have to really consider really getting rid of some exposure and picking up exposure of guys in other games. Specifically looking at the... Jimmy Butler is too cheap on FanDuel. He was brilliant with Embiid out, with Embiid quite possibly back in. You mentioned you have Simmons at 40% with Embiid playing. Would you elaborate on that play? I didn't say that. I don't know what you're referring to. I said that I wasn't talking percentages. I was talking about fantasy point projection, where without Embiid, you project Simmons, he would be north of 50. I think I had him at like 50.8. With Embiid in, it comes down to the low to mid 40s. Again, I didn't run all that math because I just didn't think he was going to play, but it costs like 7 fantasy points, and Simmons isn't that cheap anymore, so yeah, it takes a lot of shine off that play. No, I apologize if I got surly. It's not you. I'm really aggravated at the situation. Like, that is a... striking when the iron is hot, and getting plays where the public is going to be stupid and fuck something up because they don't do enough research happens 3, 5, 8, 9 times a year, and it's where you make all your money on the year. It really is. Like, you're playing to break even all the other days, and then you make $100,000 on those 5 days. So I'm tilted, aggravated by the situation because this close to people fucking that up entirely. Now, don't get me wrong. People are still donks, and people will still find a way to fuck up the situation, but it's not nearly just the simple, massive edge there would have been there. Assuming Embiid is in, how do you project these center minutes for Brooklyn? Yeah, it's a giant pain in the ass now. Ed Davis being out is significant. I still like Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, especially on DraftKings at 3,500. Absolutely fine at power forward on FanDuel at 4,500. He is going to get a lot of time. He played whatever he played last game, which was 2 days ago? Day before yesterday. Entirely in the second half, and he played 15, 17 minutes. He and Jared Allen played the center. First half he didn't play at all because Ed Davis was in. Ed Davis went out again with his ankle. Ed Davis isn't playing again. I really like Rondé Hollis-Jefferson at those numbers. Other nets, I'd still love Spencer Dinwiddie on FanDuel. He's had whatever it is, 20, 23, 25 fantasy points in the first 3 games. The minutes haven't been quite as high as I expected. I prefer him to Karis LeVert on both sites, just simply based on the prices. He's actually DK. I stand corrected. I have LeVert a little higher on DraftKings. But FanDuel, it is $1,700 to go from Dinwiddie to LeVert. I have LeVert for like 3 extra fantasy points. So FanDuel, I'm perfectly happy to run him out there. Dinwiddie, LeVert, bigger fan on DK. But again, putting Embiid in the middle, just bleh. Warming up with no assistance, he's green light. We'll see. I'm glad he doesn't need assistance to warm up. I'm out of shape in 42, and I don't need any assistance to warm up. Anything else I want to talk about in this game? Sorry, I'm really put off my game by the Embiid thing. Really frustrates me. Yeah. So Rondé I still like a ton. Feel free to get that. An interesting wrinkle would have been whether or not Mike's got closed. 2 games ago, Embiid was in, but they blew them out. Last game, Embiid was out, and Mike Scott closed, but Boban had fouled out. Maybe Mike Scott closes anyway, as both teams go small a lot at the end. That's possible. So I don't mind Mike Scott. I would rather play Rondé for the exact same price on DK. I would rather play Rondé for $500 more on FanDuel, but Mike Scott not out of play for me. Is the Nets game your least favorite game on the slate from a fantasy perspective? It might still be my favorite game on the slate from a fantasy perspective, but it went from being easily my favorite game on the slate, I mean massively, to now I really got to go back and look at everyone's prices because everything is all... And again, I spent several hours preparing, assuming... Okay, second game, 2.5 hours later. We got nice 2.5 hour chunks exactly between each game. Denver and San Antonio. Derek White gave you his 25 to 30 game 1, 25 to 30 game 2, gave you 60 game 3. Wasn't a huge fan of his game 3. He had only taken 10 or 11 shots each of the first 2 games. That limits your upside pretty significantly. Game 3 went off, took 21 shots, made 15 of them, steals, blocks, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. Just a masterpiece game. Full credit to the guy. Price, I don't think, moved on FanDuel. DK went from 4,900 or 5K up to 5,700. You can obviously play Derek White. We only have his ownership projected in the mid-teens. I'm still just fine with that play. There's, a reasonably safe floor. There's always a chance of him getting popped. Like, it's not a big chance because he's been playing well to so well. Shot extremely well those first 2 games. One of the reasons I wasn't super high on him game 3 was he shot 7 for 10 and 7 for 11 from the field in the first 2 games, and proceeded to not get to 30. So like, okay, you're shooting 70% from the field, you're still not getting me 30. I'm going to look other places for upside. Yeah, it didn't work out exactly. On DK, if I'm playing one lineup, I'd probably go back to Jamal Murray for what I expect to be an ownership difference. Murray was insane at the end of game 2, shit again game 3, shit game 1. But at the ownership, I think his odds of putting up, a GPP crushing score for me are roughly similar to those of Derek White, and the ownership is going to be well less. So if the $600 isn't costing you anything great, I would do that. I would much rather play Eric Bledsoe than either of these guys. If Embiid is in, who would be your favorite center of the day, time dependent with upcoming news? Someone is Embiid limited? Of course Embiid is going to be limited. He's been limited every game of the series. He almost didn't play. He played 24 and 21 minutes the first two games. Sat game 3. If he plays game 4, he's going to be limited in some way, shape, or form. Presumably, just minutes and not any other sort of shenanigans. But again, I don't terribly like this game. I like Malik Beasley a lot. We were there first. Now his ownership is going to be well higher than it was. He was 2.58% last slate, where I talked about him a lot. Everyone finally noticed that Barton has been such shit. And 2 games ago, he didn't play at all in the fourth quarter. Somehow, none of the other DFS providers reported that incredibly critical information. So that ended up being a great play last slate. Price on FanDuel went up to $4,700. I'm fine with it, but disinclined. This is not a good matchup. $3,800 on DK is still an excellent value play. The rest of this game, Jokic is fine. If you're spending up at center, I would rather play Jokic instead of Embiid. I have him projected again for about 50, which is about 10 points higher than Embiid. Gary Harris is fine to play, but again, not oodles of upside. The price hasn't come down that much. Looking over at the Spurs, every game in the series I've said I prefer DeRozan to Millsap. To Aldridge. Spoiler, I still prefer DeRozan. FanDuel, points per dollar, I do prefer Aldridge. The differential is close enough where $1,000 less. Yes, I'll play LaMarcus Aldridge. Jakob Poeltl is still very much in play. I liked him before the last game. He performed. I don't know if you get 31 minutes out of him again, but at $4,000, he deserves some room if Embiid plays. Otherwise, to go with the center from that game, whether it be Allen, who, by the way, if Embiid is out, Jared Allen is a great play again. I have him worse than Boban and Monroe a little bit, points per dollar. But in tournaments, I'd run him over Monroe. Certainly. But after Boban again. You can throw a punt at Bryn Forbes. I'm not thrilled. Rudy Gay, especially on FanDuel at $5,200. In the event Embiid is in, get away from your Redick. So Rudy Gay finds his way into some of the better lineups. You get him. Damari Carroll is, again, cheap at small forward there if you're paying down. But, the Nets get a hell of a lot worse when you put Embiid in the middle. Moving on to the next game. Yeah, this game is not great. It's just a far worse fantasy environment. And guys are just priced much more accurately, we'll say, than that first game. So the Embiid news sort of fucks it. Milwaukee going into Detroit. Now, again, we have 2 game 4s and 2 game 3s today. They're some people were confused on that earlier. Eric Bledsoe is still basically my favorite play on DraftKings. Would have been Boban. Now probably it's Eric Bledsoe. I have Eric Bledsoe projected for a little over 40 fantasy points every game of the series at 30 minutes. So if this game stays close, he gets more than that. If this game blows out again, he gets well less than that. Might only get you 30-something, but he's been incredible. Was 17% owned last slate. No idea what the hell people are thinking. I'm a massive, massive fan of Eric Bledsoe. He's by far my favorite buck. One of the reasons on DraftKings, I presume I would have more Harden on DK and more Giannis on FanDuel. Their projections are similar enough that doesn't really steer me one way or the other, and you're guessing on blowout or not blowout, and there's just a lot up in the air there. But on FanDuel, small forward is balls. And shooting guard has $8,100, still underpriced regardless of the presence of Embiid. D'Angelo Russell, who can get you 60 in this slate, is the same price FanDuel and DK. That's an obvious sign, and there's Jimmy Butler in there and some interesting value plays. So for that reason, I think I'd end up with more Giannis on FanDuel. On DraftKings, I would have a very, very significant amount of Eric Bledsoe. And for that reason, and again, he's still projected to be well under-owned versus what he should be. So for that reason, there's a little bit of negative correlation with Giannis, and you like having a little bit of those games. So in that case, I would probably be pivoting more towards... What do you have for Rondé's fantasy points projection? Around 20? I think that's reasonable. Again, I think I ended up with him actually having 22 minutes and 25 fantasy points. That would come down a bit with Embiid in both counts. Less likely he gets extra minutes because less likely he can get going because, again, it's Joel fucking Embiid. So probably I'd knock his minutes down to 20 and his production down to 20 now. So, yeah, it's about right now. I think 20 is a reasonable number to look at. Without Embiid in there, I think there was a real chance he played 28 minutes and had 37 fantasy points in a really good matchup. But that's well less likely now, though he's still very much in play for me. Is Beasley playable, taking 12-plus shots? Yes, he's eminently playable. And Third game in a row I'm talking about him. So, yeah, love Bledsoe. Middleton, like much less than Bledsoe. FanDuel, you're saving $400. I still like him quite a bit. I really want him by himself if I'm sort of fading the rest of this team. I'm fine playing Giannis and Bledsoe on DK. I'm fine playing Giannis. I'm fine playing Bledsoe. I'm fine playing Middleton. Middleton, Giannis kind of makes my ass hurt a little bit. I really don't want to do that. Bledsoe, Middleton, I'm fine with. Tony Snell may very possibly play. This is pretty important to me because I think people will be... I would underown Pat Connaughton for that reason. I would underown Sterling Brown, who hasn't been that great for that reason. He's a better defensive player than either of those guys, and they don't need offense out of that position. They just want someone to be a decent wing defender out there. So I'm not shocked if Tony Snell returns, starts, plays 26 minutes, and those guys play 13 and 18. So I'm really not inclined towards the wing value on Milwaukee. Obviously, they can still get their 30 whatever minutes in a close game out of Pat Connaughton. Last game was really exciting. And if I had to play one of them, it probably would be Pat Connaughton at their current prices. But like $5,400 Pat Connaughton on FanDuel, I think is going to be like 15% owned, and I'm thrilled with those people probably paying the rake. Pistons, Drummond, I'd rather play Jokic, both sites at his price. He's obviously very much in play. It's been a difficult matchup for him. Second game was fine. First game was dog shit, but again, they got crushed. I have him projected for about 45 fantasy points. That's not super exciting, but you can get a ceiling game out of him here. If Blake plays, I really would just be like, okay, fuck the Pistons. If Blake is out, I'm fine with Andre Drummond. I'm fine with Ish Smith as a punt. I'm fine with Reggie Jackson as a tournament play. I'm okay with Luke Kennard. There is obviously a significant chance he plays 35, 38 minutes or what have you. He played 35 in the last game. He would have played 37 or 38 if not for finally giving up to the blowout. So that has to be interesting. In a tournament, I would rather play Reggie Jackson. I would rather play Wayne Ellington. I would rather play just almost anyone else. With a price at $5,200. $4,100 and $5,200 are significantly different. You might say, how are they different? By $1,100. Let's move on to our final game of the evening. Rockets going into the Jazz. God, we still have no news yet. Fuck yourself. Go through this last game real quick. Share with us a sports pick today. Yeah, that's not going to happen. I'm tilted over the Embiid thing. And I'm never going to know either. Really aggravated. Well, I mean, you might say. So I discussed the Harden Giannis thing. I won't overly belabor that. There's no amount of Harden. That is too much Harden. Both Chris Paul and Clint Capella, at their prices, both sites make strong tournament plays for me. Again, I project them to average like 37 and 38 fantasy points per game in the postseason. I think they'll both have in the series, rather. I think they'll both have a 50 burger at some point. Although if it only goes 4 games, a little bit less likely. But you look at the 4 games during the regular season, and that's basically everything that it drove you towards. So I think they're fine. I don't love them. I don't hate them. I would have 10, 15%. I wouldn't have them in the same lineup. I wouldn't have Paul in the same lineup as Harden, etc., etc. I don't really want to play Eric Gordon. I would have a couple shares in 150 lineups. I don't really want to play PJ Tucker. I'd have a couple shares in 150 lineups. But again, I have Rondé, who I still have projected a couple points higher and costs you $800 and $1,000 less. If you made me play another guy, it would probably be barely Daniel House over Kenneth Faried. They're both on the edges of playable. As far as the Jazz goes, I like Donovan Mitchell in tournaments. In the event Embiid is in, probably a place I'd be interested in pivoting on FanDuel off Butler and on DK off Butler in theory. The ceiling game is there. The ownership should be well down. He has looked like shit and shot like shit. Again, all 3 of these later games are not brilliant. The third one is probably the most appealing for me, and there I need Detroit to keep it close. But the second and fourth game are really, really strong defenses, and you're going to get something a lot like last night where eventually the Thunder broke out. But through those first 2 games, we literally had Boston being the highest scoring team with 104 points. Isn't Joel out? Wasn't he doubtful? Welcome to my world. The choice is Pat Connaughton or PJ Tucker. It would come down to correlation for me. I have them both projected for somewhere around 20 fantasy points. I have Tucker at 19. I have Connaughton at like 20 and a half, 21. It's just the minutes. If Snell is out, easily Pat Connaughton. Make that super clear. Still no Brogdon. If there's no Tony Snell, easily Pat Connaughton. So if you're playing on DK, hopefully you get that news. If Snell is in, I don't goddamn know. Joel Embiid is in the layup line. That's incredibly okay. He hasn't given up yet. Like, I imagine he goes. He's still warming up. He warmed up fairly briefly before the last game, called himself out. By the time the game started, he was on the bench in a leisure suit. He's still going 20 minutes before tip. I imagine my dude is gonna play. So for the Jazz, don't really want a Joe Ingles. You can have a couple shares in 150. Don't love it. Rudy Gobert, especially DK price, very strong in cash. Just fine to play in tournaments. Slightly prefer Jokic in tournaments at his price. Not the best spot for Gobert, but it's still Gobert priced that far down. Royce O'Neal playable in a punt capacity. Derek Favors, FanDuel 7,500. I think you can do better. DK 5,600. That's still very interesting for me. I like that. So DK, Rubio, Mitchell, Favors, Gobert. I'm fine with all those guys. Probably don't want more than one, but I'm fine with all those guys. FanDuel, Rubio at 7,100. Sure. Mitchell 8,500. Sure. Again, these plays all relative to their compatriots on the Nets and the 76ers start of day. Just projected 5 or 6 points worse for guys who cost the same amount. Now they're pretty close. So, yeah. Okay, I'm putting out my news, my alerts. Gonna take some amphetamines or something to feel better about this bullshit. Favors or Levert? I'll play Favors now. Ugh. I'm like heartbroken. It was good. We're never going to know, but it was going to be so good. Yeah, it's frustrating. I'm angry at the other people who do my job in the industry for not doing better research. Saw 11 people today, and everyone was like, I like Greg Monroe. You can play Boban in a tournament. There was absolutely no reason, if you paid the slightest attention to rotations, to think that Greg Monroe would have played more minutes or scored more fantasy points than Boban, and you were going to get 8% Boban and 40% on Greg Monroe. Is Pat Connaughton your favorite sub 425K play if no Snell? No, I would still prefer Rondé Hollis Jefferson at $3,500. So, I'm despondent. If I was fucking playing with my own money and throwing $10,000 today, I would be livid. Livid. So, I guess I got that going for me. So I'm vicariously pissed off for you guys. Rondé played 15 minutes, though. He did. Entirely in the second half. You know why? Because he was playing center. Because Ed Davis only played in the first half due to an injury. Ed Davis is out today. These are all facts. So in theory, 30 minutes. I'm projected for well less than that, and having Embiid in there completely fucks your world. But yes, he did play 15 minutes. Why is Eddie so mad? Go watch back that. Wait, why are you fired up? Embiid was doubtful. If he doesn't play, there is going to be 40% Greg Monroe and like 7% Boban Marjanovic, who for a couple $100 more I had projected for like 16 more fantasy points. And everyone in the entire industry fucked it up, and no one was going to do it right. And we were going to do it right, and everyone was going to win. It was going to be this year's Andrew Bogut play, for those who remember that fondly. So that is why I am so pissed off. And seriously, I worked the whole year for the once a month that spot comes up, and it came up, and people... I'm not mad. I'm not going to go upstairs and kick the dog. I'm frustrated, but seriously, like... Most days, you're trying to grind it out, and I'm hoping half y'all can break even, and I'm trying to, really... So, when that spot comes up, and then it's like, oh, no. It's really frustrating. You rarely get a so incredibly wrong... You still have hope? I'm sitting there looking. Same as you. 13 minutes. Fire up some questions, I guess. Tweet questions. Condolences. Assuming Embiid is in five favorite plays on the slate, or 63% of the lineup. Bledsoe projected for 8% on FanDuel. Good ownership pivot despite 8K price. Yes, that's a a brilliant ownership. Generally, I think you end up paying down there a lot. Dinwiddie at 4,700. I think I've made my affection evident. But Middleton or Harris. Assuming you don't have Giannis, certainly Middleton at this point. Assuming Embiid plays, everything is dependent. Like everyone on the 76ers or Nets is going to be the answer if Embiid is out, and probably not the answer if Embiid is in. Dinwiddie has only fucked me though. Yeah, that's fair. I can't turn off the fact that most likely I think you can bring the minutes projection down a little bit and say 28, but he should be a point per minute guy on FanDuel. $4,700 guy. That's too exceptional. But he's been disappointing every game. Aaron Baines got in there on the day of no value, $3,800, played 21 minutes. You told me his ass was going to play 21 minutes. I would have been so excited. Ooh. Our robocallers. Embiid in. Yep. Well, that happened. Alright, so I'm going to go look at these potential lineups I made and rip them apart. See what we do now. Yep. 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 And yep. Yep. So angry. So angry. You're playing Embiid, fuck it. I think that's a really bad idea. Good luck. There's a lineup someone posted. Lock and load Embiid, GPP, DK. I think that's a very bad idea. The best fantasy producers in the game average like 1.8 fantasy points a minute. Let's give Embiid better than that. Let's say Embiid gets 2 fantasy points a minute. And in 2 games of the series, once he had about 1.5 and once he had about 2.5. So also averaging those, we get about 2 fantasy points a minute. How many minutes do you think he plays? Multiply that by 2. Is that a number of fantasy points you would like to get for his salary? I don't think it is, but there you go. Can you still play the Boban lineup if Embiid is out? Well, Embiid is... maybe he can't go after 10 or 12 minutes. You can certainly still play Boban. This changed Boban's projection from 24 minutes in my book, which might have been conservative. There's a real chance you got 30 minutes, but you needed Mike Scott not to close him, to now he's going to back up Embiid and plays 15 or 18 minutes. Still a great matchup, and dude can still absolutely smash in that time. But, yeah. Mm-hmm. Millsap Favors on DK. I think I'll go with Favors. He will be higher owned, but I will still go with Favors there. One of them will get dropped, but can you play Carroll and Harris on FanDuel together? Should I take a stand and then play Crowder in the other spot? No, I'm fine with playing the 2 of them. I think it's worth it for the unique distinction of the lineup, and Crowder played 15 minutes in the last game. I'd like to see more Crowder. I think if they want to win, they should play more Crowder, more Royce O'Neal. Look at this. Looking at my hypothetical DK lineup with its 6 guys from that first game in it. Yeah, none of you should be played anymore. Like, I don't even want to build a better one now. I'm sad. My sadness knows no bounds. Thoughts on Bledsoe or Middleton? Either or. Play Bledsoe. There you go. That's easy. Certainly on DK. FanDuel, it's actually ends up being really close for me. DraftKings, just play Bledsoe. I have him projected for 7 more fantasy points and similar ownership, and 8.5 minutes out, everybody. So sad. So sad. You have 6,800 left in 1 guard spot. Play Bledsoe. Maybe you already have Bledsoe. Play Chris Middleton. Simmons or DeRozan on DK? Yeah, I'd have him priced almost identically at this point. I believe I still have Ben Simmons now for somewhere around a fantasy point more. Again, Simmons would have been like 51. Now he's like 43 and a half, 44. I think I have DeRozan generally getting in the area of 42 to 43. So, I think ownership is still doing a little better with DeRozan, but I'd have Simmons for like a fantasy point more. So, it's really as you will. No strong take. Favorite GPP plays on DraftKings? Eric Bledsoe should be up to like 20. I guess, let me see if we have updated ownership. I'm kind of hilarious to see what this looks like. Center's not named Joel Embiid. I really think, again, people are going to be, I think you're going to get like, I'm going to say you get like 23% owned Embiid. And again, just, it does not make sense from a point per dollar standpoint. What do you honestly think you're going to get? Like, if it goes perfect, barring him randomly out of the blue playing, 28 minutes or something, you're going to get like 60. No. Harden and Giannis, same lineup on FanDuel and GPP. I think that's great. Thoughts on Jamal Murray, FanDuel, GPP after a terrible Game 3? I like him. Can we still play Boban? Yes, you can. Who's a good pivot off Redick on DK? Dinwiddie? People are saying Embiid doesn't look very mobile by warming up. Someone just messaged me 5 minutes ago. Well, newsflash. He's in. You would rather masturbate with a handful of metal shards than play Pistons Wayne Ellington. That's a strong take. I would rather play Wayne Ellington than Luke Kennard. But I might rather masturbate with a handful of metal shards than do either. Would you avoid having Joe Harris, DAR, and Dinwiddie in the same FanDuel lineups? It's kind of tolerable on FanDuel. Like, I don't think it's great. I don't really want to play Joe Harris. I worry about his minutes. His defense has been a real issue, etc., etc. Yes, Yahoo reporting Embiid starting. Yeah, he's in. He's going to start. He's going to play probably 24 minutes. If I'm playing Blake and Drummond in a line on FanDuel, do I have to... Don't play Blake. I mean, a line, if you're playing 50 lines and one has Blake in it, sure, he hasn't played in a while. Maybe he's 100%. Maybe he plays 30-something minutes. I'd have to be playing a lot of lines till I got to Blake Griffin. If you are playing Blake and Drummond, do I have to follow with ABC, assuming it stays close? I would think you would have to follow it with either like Bledsoe and Middleton or ABC. Yes, those in that one weird lineup. Dr. Miles Stuffles, is Eddie Line? You're not watching the show? What the hell are you doing? That's like 5 people in Premium Slack not watching the show. I blame Josh or whoever set up the YouTube and ended me in the goddamn hockey thing again. Blake Griffin, a shot in the dark DK GPP play, playing 3 lineups. Certainly is now. Like, before today, I would have been like, yeah, I don't really want to do that. Putting Blake in one of your 3 lineups, again, you can swap him out. It's the 3rd game, so assuming you're going to be paying attention, he's $7,400. Yeah, if he plays and starts, I'm going to like him quite a bit. You need him to play and start. Your show is not posted on the main Awesemo channel, that's why. Okay, assuming EMAC, you commented like you were watching the show. Again, I ended up in hockey again today. That costs viewers, which I don't really care about when it's YouTube. But it also costs like our members in the Premium Slack who pay not to find the show. That's not cool with me. So if you would kindly figure out what went sideways and straighten it out, if you will. 4 minutes. Murray or Rubio in a DK GPP? I prefer Rubio. But Murray, I think the ownership ends up being a little better. I will look at our current projection there. We have Rubio at 26%. We have Murray, I don't see him. I'm guessing he's going to be in the 10 range. We have him at 12. So, yeah. Jokic or Drummond, DK GPP. I would prefer Jokic a little bit. Certainly, if Blake comes in. But they're fairly close at price. Just a little more upside for Jokic. Everything finally bounces right for him. Like, he got the triple-double, and he's just not shooting a ton. But there's, it's gotten plus 50 a couple times. Getting to 60 is not impossible for him. It seems a little more likely than Drummond spiking that number. So, slightly prefer running Jokic out there. Let me check the ownerships on those guys. I wonder if our ownership is... We still have 37% Greg Monroe. Which, in fairness, you could make an argument you should still add exposure because of how late that news was. 9 minutes before lock. Again, exactly, by the way. That there's still going to be... Like, I will guess the ownership on Greg Monroe on DraftKings in the largest tournament the same way I always do it at 4 or 5%. It will be a significant portion of the rake. This is still good news, but White, Spencer, and LeVert, please rank on DK. And again, it's going to have to do with the other guys you play in a tournament at their just points per dollar at their prices. I very slightly have LeVert over White over Spencer, but they're all in the same range. But LeVert, White, Spencer is how I end up with them. Mitchell or DeRozan on a DK GPP. I would probably go to Donovan Mitchell at this point for the differential in the ownership there. I have DeRozan projected for about 2 more fantasy points. So for that reason, I think my dog is playing with a hockey team up there or something. So aggravated. Yeah, so literally I think, you should have 3 guys from the first game now instead of 5 or 6. Dudley and LeVert starting over Kurucs and Harris, I'm assuming. I'm assuming it's Dudley, LeVert, Carroll, D-Russ, and Allen. I guess I'll just look myself. Russell, Harris. Okay, Joe Harris is still starting. Jesus Christ. All right, LeVert, this is good moving to the starting lineup for him because the minutes are more valuable than the potential lost usage. So I like LeVert quite a bit. He very possibly gets 30 minutes now. He's been halfway decent at like 23. So I do think this is a positive change for LeVert, and it's a minute and a half before lock, so feel free to LeVert yourself up a little bit. Dudley, I really don't care. It's a bit of a kick away from Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, but not enough that would really change things for me. No change for D'Angelo Russell. Slightly less excited about having some Damari Carroll in my life. Russ, Harris, LeVert, Dudley, Allen. Yeah, got that. Top 3 forwards on DK. I don't know how to answer that question in 30 seconds, so I will handle it again post-lock if you would like to ask it again. Stuff. Yeah. All right, coming down to it. Nets lineup. There's a little bit of news. Also, LeVert getting the start. I did not think that would happen, and specifically said so. Shout out to Justin Fan, who prognosticated that correctly. Bully for him. That's a good spot. I thought that they would do Dinwiddie before him. I thought they really liked LeVert's activity in that second unit. There's definitely a chance that it goes very badly for LeVert, as in he still plays 23 minutes, and now he's out there next to D-Russ. Almost all of it as opposed to almost none of it, and that's not a good thing for your usage. But I think it's more likely that the minutes increase is significant enough that it nets out being good news for him. And we are locked. Echoing. I started echoing all of a sudden. That's good. Is FanDuel broken for anyone? I started echoing. My anger has... Why would I start echoing after an hour on the air? The setup's only good for an hour. Anyone else have a weird thing with FanDuel? Or just maybe... Did I... Hey, there it is. Okay, that was weird. I might have been logged into the wrong account. It sounds kind of awesome, you're not going to lie. Well, we're almost done anyway. So, ownerships on FanDuel. Spencer Dinwiddie, 33%. So, be gentle with me getting Spencer Dinwiddie wrong and stuff. It's not like the dude hasn't been popular. Feels a lot better than Collison yesterday, although I was going to say there's a lot more value today than yesterday. Embiid did bullets that up pretty good. Let's see. Rondé, 39% on FanDuel. I got real in a goddamn hurry. D-Russ, 25. Jimmy Butler, 20. JJ Redick, 21. Boban Marjanovic, 8%. Where's the Greg Monroe number?
Jarrett Allen, 15%. Yeah, you don't want that. Embiid, 7.5% on FanDuel. Now, that's FanDuel, you only get one center, etc. I do think it's higher. Tobias Harris, 37%. Karis LeVert, 23. That would feel pretty good to me if I had him. Simmons, 28. Again, probably a little more than I would want. I'm looking for a Greg Monroe, dude. I'm going to give up after clicking on a few more lineups, but it's going to be a non-zero number. And then I will go look on DK. Greg Monroe, 11% on FanDuel. I don't project him to play. So no rake on FanDuel. That's what I'm saying. Like, shit goes sideways. Like, I talked about the, getting the massive break, and it's not as good as that was going to be, but that's still pretty sexy when people throw away their money like that. So rake free on FanDuel. DraftKings. I'll start clicking on names. I better come up with a Greg Monroe pretty quick. Embiid, 7%. That feels pretty good. Boban, 15. Give you an idea. Who's going to be the Greg Monroe? Who's going to screw it up? Come on. Come on. Ronde, 34. LeVert, 38. Greg Monroe, 17.3. I'm simultaneously, you all won't make as much money as you should, and that I don't get to get free money when people are stupid. Oh well, enjoy your free money. Well, less than... God, this amazes me. Like, I thought it was going to be over. Maybe this was better. This may have been better. Like, I feel better. Like, this... I assumed he was going to be 6 or 8% owned, which would have been great. Knocking off half the rake is outstanding. 17% owned Greg Monroe is better than what I predicted, which was you'd get 40% Greg Monroe as opposed to the much better play Boban 10%. I don't think Greg Monroe plays. Maybe he does. But, again, part of the 31 reasons to know that he was a worse player than Boban today was he's behind Boban in the rotation, and it has been forever. So they were just keeping their rotations together, but they were giving Boban the longer stretches. So they didn't want to take Boban out of backup center in that last game. So I really doubt they want to take Boban out of backup center in this game. So, yeah, maybe you get 8 minutes of Greg Monroe. $17. Congratulations, everybody. Well better than no rake today. So, best of luck, my friends. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry if I got sideways there, but I still think we covered basically everything that has to be done. Embiid, 4 points in the steal. Yeah, he's that's, I don't know if he's done anything else. That's 6 fantasy points in 2 minutes. It's 3 fantasy points a minute. That's about what you need for him to be a good play, probably. Like he costs, what, 10.9 on FanDuel, 9.7 on DK. Can we agree he needs 50 to be considered good? You know what I'm saying? Because you're probably going to get 60 plus out of either Harris or whatever, and it's just not that much more for Harris, Harden, and Giannis. Just weren't that much more. So, one of them is going to get you, if you're lucky, it's 90. So 50 out of Embiid is good. How many minutes do you think he plays? I think 24 is optimistic. But let's say 24. Okay, you need 2.1 fantasy points per minute. Can he do that? Yeah, he did it the first game of the series. But, I like him a lot at whatever he was on, 7% or something. I'm absolutely fine with 7% Joel Embiid. I just thought he would be higher owned than that. I presumed that some people would take out my Greg Monroe and put in Joel Embiid, and clearly that did not occur to the extent that I expected it to. There we are, everybody. Well, look at my hair. I just try to return the thing on. See, this is some weird-ass, like, Mad Men something going on here where, like, look at this shit. I look like I look like Sean Connery as James Bond with his toupee. This is something. That's what happens when I wash my hair. I literally hadn't touched it. I had no idea. That's. Look at that. I look like a dork. Okay, so there that is. I will be back. Yeah, John Hamm. Yeah, I look kind of like how the hell do I not remember the name of the protagonist from Mad Men? How the hell do I not remember the name of the protagonist from Mad Men? It's Peggy. I don't know if it's nothing to do with basketball. I'm going to sit here until it comes to mind. I'm not looking at the screen either because I'm sure someone said it by now. Feel around for this. I keep wanting to say Dirk. And there's no way the guy's name is Dirk. What the hell is going on in my brain right now? I've seen every episode of the show twice. This is embarrassing. Kind of funny. Don Draper. Jesus. Okay, so I that took way too long. I kept thinking Dirk Diggler. So the double D's somehow resounded with me. The alliteration. But the I'm sorry, no, that's alliteration. That was really weird. That was 30 seconds. None of us will ever get back in our lives. Roger Sterling, the best character in that show. Yes, he was. He had the joie de vivre. As he said. You prefer Dirk Diggler? So do I. I like Mad Men. I think it's mildly overrated, as it's like somewhere in the 6 to 8 range of my greatest TV shows ever ranking. Really good show. But it's I think mildly overrated, as some people have it like 1, 2, 3, and I think that is a tier too high. But there it is. Okay, so yeah, I guess I have a phone call. Bon